Revealed, 10 unexpected and transformative practices of Caligula that shocked the ancient world. The headline screamed at Tara from the bleary glow of her computer screen, a newfound obsession lighting fires in her mind. The room around her was cluttered with boxes of forgotten family heirlooms, each filled with the weighty legacy of expectations and failures. A biting chill ran through her, echoing the tension simmering beneath her surface. Could Caligula, the embodiment of moral decay, hold the key to her own unfulfilled ambitions? As Tara sifted through antiquated texts, buried beneath disappointments from both academia and her family lineage, she stumbled upon an ancient manuscript. Each twist of her own history felt akin to Caligula's tyrannical rule, a blend of madness that thrived on moral decay. Her heart raced as she jotted down her interpretations, drawing parallels between that infamous emperor and today's leaders who skirt ethics for power. But with each finding, the stranglehold of doubt tightened. Was she merely enraged by the dismissals of her male colleagues, or truly onto something groundbreaking? The clock ticked, amplifying her anxiety. Leaning over the pages crammed with handwritten notes, she felt a rush of urgency. Her family's burdens hung heavy, mountains of debt from her father's collapse in the business world loomed over her. She thought of her supportive, traditional family, who still believed in the old standards of academia, circles of well-accepted thought. The path she was treading was dangerous, a potential storm brewing between her desperate need for acknowledgement and the familial loyalty that bore down from the past. Before she could allow herself to spiral, the real fear hit her: would pursuing what she believed in truly merit risking her family's hopes for her? The agony clawed at her insides, emotion swelling dangerously close to a breaking point. Taking a breath, she reminded herself of the opportunity ahead. The academic conference that could make or break her career was looming ever closer, its potential both thrilling and unnerving. Just as she began contemplating how to present these ideas, a message from her estranged father illuminated her screen, revealing family secrets that could change everything she knew about herself. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Yet, as Tara stood on the precipice of sharing these findings, the weight of the manuscript's truths and her family's tainted legacy bore down on her. The further she delved, the more the realities of both were intertwined in a complex tapestry of abandonment and betrayal. What if her family's historical wrongs, twisted by institutions much like Caligula's reign, overshadowed her urgent quest for recognition? An internal scream urged her onwards, but the fear of disappointing them felt like a shackle restraining her identity. With everything veering toward chaos, Tara sensed that she teetered on the edge of defining her own legacy. The moment of decision hovered close, and as the clock ticked mercilessly, so did the understanding that she had to confront what held her back from embracing her truth. Would she emerge victorious from the shadows of her lineage? The question gnawed at her, but only one thing remained clear: in her pursuit, she would challenge not just the academic world, but herself, in the most profound and revealing way possible. The next move was hers, and it would change everything. The room resonated with silence, save for the rhythmic click of a clock that felt like a relentless heartbeat hammering against her resolve. Tara stared at the glowing screen, her father's chilling message hanging in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. Secrets. Questions had long swirled about her family's past, often silenced by the rigid expectations that weighed heavily upon her shoulders. The manuscript she had uncovered felt like a lifeline, yet it also threatened to submerge her in an abyss of familial legacy. Paying heed to her racing thoughts, Tara grabbed her notebook and began scribbling furiously, the panic giving rise to clarity. Each line she wrote was a step away from the conventional path her family had paved for her. She remembered her father's face from fragmented memories, an ambitious man driven by success, crumbling under the weight of his failures. This revelation stirred something primal within her. Was he confessing to her, Or was it merely another attempt to dissolve the chains of discourse he had long avoided? Framed between chapters of ancient decadence, Terra glimpsed an opportunity to reclaim her narrative. Caligula's transformation was one of unchecked desire and ambition. It became evident that her pursuit, while steeped in the fear of familial disapproval, bore a striking parallel. She needed to examine her own moral compass. The ancient provocateur thrived in chaos, but Terra was determining to harness the clarity it could yield. Exposing the shadows of her past could very well liberate her, turning familial burdens into a source of strength. But should it come at the cost of her family's esteem? A profound sense of urgency propelled her. Reflecting on her manuscript notes, each insight into Caligula's corruption ignited her conviction. What if the revelations she unearthed in her research held the power to not only redefine her academic footing but to also shatter the last remnants of her family's imposing legacy? She felt an intoxicating thrill at the prospect, yet a flicker of doubt settled in. Hadn't history shown such pursuits often end in tragedy? Terra pushed aside her hesitation. It was time to confront the past directly. Searching the cramped room, she rifled through old boxes of her father's achievements, prizes, and accolades he had once cherished. Each item resonated with a bygone era of success, but now they were remnants of a man broken by expectations. What once seemed like a guiding light now appeared as a cage. She plucked an old trophy from the clutter, her reflection mirrored in its polished surface, forcing her to face the question that loomed larger than any physical embodiment of success: who was she, truly? The answer began to solidify within her. She was not his shadow, she was a woman forged in the fire of disappointment, ready to carve her truth. Realization blossomed, pulling her toward action. Terra knew that the academic conference was not merely a chance to assert her findings but a pivotal moment to rediscover her voice. If she could challenge accepted norms, perhaps she could simultaneously dismantle the oppressive fragments of her past. This was no longer merely about academia, it was a fight for her identity. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, pulsing with adrenaline as she prepared to draft her presentation. Time was slipping away, and with it, the frightened versions of Terra that feared judgment and rejection. The clock struck ominously, sounding the urgency of her decisions. She was poised to take a bold step, to stagger past the fear looming ahead. As she saved her notes, a renewed determination surged through her. Overwhelmed yet invigorated, she understood it was time to face her father, the ghosts of her family history, and, most importantly, herself. Would she find the courage to disclose the depths of her discoveries, or would the weight of expectations hold her hostage? The impending confrontation with her father loomed large, whispering threats against her realization. It was time to put everything on the line. The moment had come for her voice to resonate unapologetically. Terra's heart raced as she stood before the mirror, the weight of her father's legacy pressing down on her like a vice. The reflection staring back was both familiar and foreign, a young woman caught between expectation and ambition. Each line on her face, each crease of uncertainty in her brow, spoke volumes about her internal struggle. She had spent years living within the confines of her family's high standards, but now the thought of breaking free filled her with a sense of both dread and exhilaration. As she prepared for the conference, every word she typed seemed to fuel her resolve. The research she had immersed herself in not only shed light on Caligula's controversial leadership but also unraveled a series of personal parallels. His infamous reputation stemmed from a yearning for power that had ultimately fragmented his humanity. Did she risk becoming similarly consumed if she chased her aspirations too fiercely? The questions amplified with every keystroke. Revisiting her notes became a ritual. Terra examined the heinous decisions made by Caligula, a ruler who, entwined with his history of chaos, ultimately stood alone, much as she felt on the precipice of her own decisions. His wild, unchecked ambition both terrified and fascinated her. She was fully aware that ambition could devour those who didn't tread carefully. Was she breaking out of the mold, or was she destined to replicate his failures in her quest for recognition? In moments of doubt, she returned to the manuscript. With each page, the paralyzing weight of expectation morphed into motivation. She grasped the raw power of storytelling, recognizing how both history and personal narrative could serve as a catalyst for transformation. She was not merely a passive observer, she could mold her fate through the stories she chose to share. Every anecdote about Caligula ignited a spark of revelation that perhaps her own tale could catalyze understanding and reflection. Yet, grappling with her father's shadow was unavoidable. She envisioned their confrontation, where he'd question her motives, where specters of past dialogues would echo in the air like bitter remnants of bitterness. It was a malevolence that could easily extinguish her flame, or worse, engulf her in a spiral of self-doubt and retreat. Would he see her for the independent thinker she intended to be, or would he only perceive another failure in his lineage? As the hour of her presentation approached, she envisioned standing before her peers, armed with the knowledge that, like Caligula, she had the power to reshape the narrative not necessarily for the approval of those around her, but for her sense of self. Tara took a deep breath, steadying herself against the rising tide of fear. Her pencil gripped tightly, she scribbled her final thoughts as if they were lifelines, desperate connections to her own truth. The anxious whispers in her mind began to quiet, replaced instead by an ember of hope. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. Intensely aware of time slipping through her fingers, she prepared her final slide that would summarize her core argument. This wasn't merely a lesson on power dynamics from the past, it was a testimony of survival, a bridge connecting her historical fascinations to her modern-day struggles. Each passing minute heightened her anticipation, transforming nervous energy into a concrete plan of execution. She whispered a mantra to herself, a reminder that her voice mattered separate from her father's, separate from Caligula's. This was about reclaiming her identity in a way she had never dared before. As Tara turned to leave her room, the door creaked open, the world beyond buzzing with activity and the inevitable clash of her past and present. The air crackled with potential, and in that charged moment, she knew, she was ready. And the thought loomed large: would she emerge from this experience unscathed and whole, or would the encounter unravel everything she had fought to build? Tara stepped into the conference hall, and the roar of voices filled the air, an electrifying hum that swirled around her like a whirlwind. Each face turned her way felt like a spotlight, magnifying the doubt that lingered just beneath the surface. She took a moment to gather herself, inhaling deeply, grounding her thoughts in purpose. This was her moment not to prove her worth to her father or the world, but to assert her identity in a sphere that had often felt alien. As the sound of murmurs faded, she walked confidently to the podium, the rough surface of the wood beneath her fingertips transmitting a message of resilience. The audience's gaze felt heavy, but she gripped her notes tightly, shifting her focus inward. She recalled the countless hours spent delving into Caligula's psyche and the lessons unearthed from his narrative, each one positioned to reveal something profound not only about history but about herself. When she began speaking, she wove a narrative that linked Caligula's rise and fall with her own journey towards independence. With each sentence, she shed layers of anxiety, replacing them with conviction. Her voice resonated, an anchor of clarity amidst the chaotic backstory she narrated. Tara illustrated the delicate dance of ambition and its potential pitfalls, ensuring her audience felt the weight of her message, the fragility of ambition tinged with the perils of obsession. Yet, a flicker of self-doubt danced at the edge of her mind. With each illustration of Caligula's missteps, she grappled with the fear that her own ambitions might lead her to similar isolation. Would she stand alone at the pinnacle of her career, haunted by the shadows of her father's expectations and her own failures? As she transitioned into her key arguments, an unexpected electric thrill coursed through her. She had devised a unique, analytical framework to reinterpret Caligula's actions, drawing parallels to modern-day leadership. Tara discovered that the audience, initially skeptical, began to lean forward in their seats, intrigued rather than distant. Eyes darted down to her notes as she delineated points succinctly, her passion mingling with data. This was where her true strength lay, bridging personal conviction with academic rigor. With each slide turned, she felt a deeper connection form with her audience, a shared understanding dancing beneath the surface. It was no longer just about Caligula, it was about the human experience, the pursuit of authenticity, and the struggle against inherited expectations. Yet, a familiar flicker of apprehension tugged at her heart as she approached the final segment of her presentation, where she would disclose her revelations on personal transformation in the context of leadership. Exposing her vulnerabilities would require a breadth of courage she wasn't sure she possessed. Could she genuinely present her insights without veering into the looming shadow of her father's legacy? Just as she was about to make her concluding remarks, her father's face materialized in her mind, disapproving, filled with disappointment, as if he had summoned the specter of every time he had belittled her dreams. Tara's heart raced at the thought, yet she squared her shoulders and took a breath that felt like an awakening. She would not allow that fear to dictate her success. True leadership, she declared, her voice steady, involves not just ambition, but the humility to reflect on one's path. It is shaped by our choices and our ability to learn from history. She paused, letting the gravity of her words linger in the air. The audience remained still, absorbing the weight of her assertion, and in that precarious moment, Tara felt liberated. She had broken through her own barriers, each word she spoke reinforcing her right to exist outside of her father's narrative. As applause erupted, a tingle of triumph surged through her, countering the tendrils of anxiety. She had seized control of the story, her story. Yet, as she stepped down from the podium, a nagging question echoed in her mind: had she truly escaped the chains of her lineage, or was this merely a prelude to a far more profound reckoning? Tara stepped off the podium, buoyed by a mix of adrenaline and lingering uncertainty. The applause still reverberated in her ears, but as she made her way through the crowd, the voices morphed into a cacophony of expectations. Each handshake and congratulatory remark felt like a tether pulling her back into old patterns, a tug-of-war between her burgeoning identity and the shadows of her father's influence. Within moments, she spotted a familiar face amidst the throng appear from her past: Janet, who had once been a close ally in their academic pursuits but had recently distanced herself. Janet's expression was unreadable, a blend of admiration and something else that felt a touch sharper: judgment. "I didn't know you had it in you," Janet remarked, her tone neutral yet edged with an undercurrent of competitiveness. "Your mix of historical analysis with personal storytelling was surprising." Tara forced a smile, a tightness in her chest echoing her discomfort. "I was just sharing my perspective. It's not easy to carve a path in a legacy that feels like a way station rather than a starting point." Her attempt at vulnerability felt like an invitation, but Janet's eyes darted away, dismissing the openness. "True. Caligula is an interesting lens, but I hope you're ready for the scrutiny. The academic world thrives on origins just as much as on ideas. You might stir the pot, but not everyone is prepared to digest it," Janet replied before turning to greet others, leaving Tara standing on the periphery, questions swirling in her mind. Did she truly merit the attention given, or was her moment merely a blip, an echo of past biases held not just by her father, but by the entire academic community? Tara felt the stirrings of doubt reigniting. Her presentation had been a performance, a reclamation of space, yet she realized it was a precarious high-wire act. The applause was just noise if the underlying narratives remained unchanged. In the weeks following her presentation, she became obsessed with refining her insights, diving into deeper research not only on Caligula but on leadership, ambition, and her own motivations. She read voraciously, not shying away from more critical interpretations of her subject matter. Each new article opened a door into a labyrinth of thoughts, reflecting not only on historical implications but also touching on her own psyche. She started journaling her reflections. Writing became a sanctuary where she could express questions without fear of judgment. The ink transformed her musings. She wrote about her battles with inherited expectations and the burdensome idea that she bore a legacy of failure. The act felt empowering, even if the content was challenging to wrestle with. One evening, as she flipped through her notes, she stumbled upon an aggressive critique of her position, one not from academics, but a harsh comment from her father that had once stung deeply. "You'll always be in someone's shadow if that's all you aspire to be." The weight of those words settled on her. He had been right in a twisted sense. She'd spent too long trying to shape herself into something he could respect rather than forging her own identity, less dependent on his approval. Tara put pen to paper and wrote an open letter to him, mapping out her thoughts on responsibility, ambition, and her decision to thrive in her own right. The release came with clarity. It was not enough to simply articulate her ideas publicly. She needed to confront her past head-on. Could she challenge the narrative he crafted and rewrite her story completely? The growing sense of resolve was mixed with fear, as she questioned the implications of such a move. In that moment of introspection, Tara realized that confronting her father wasn't just a confrontation, it was essential for her liberation. The pursuit of authenticity demanded a reckoning not just with herself, but with him. As she prepared her thoughts for that inevitable confrontation, Tara couldn't shake a final thought: what would happen once she confronted her father with the truth she had uncovered? Would the fallout be as liberating as she hoped, or would it keep her tethered to the chains she so desperately sought to break? The time had come to face the past directly. Tara stood at her desk, the dim light casting elongated shadows across the pages of her research. The weight of her father's words still clung to her, a constant reminder of the battle waging within. She had committed to confronting him, yet the prospect felt equally liberating and terrifying. Would he dismiss her newfound understanding or challenge her even more fiercely? The very thought sent an electric jolt of anxiety through her. As days morphed into nights, the initial rush after her presentation faded, replaced by a steadfast determination. Tara knew the path ahead would not be straightforward. She began layering her research, creating thematic connections between Caligula's controversial actions and her own struggles against oppressive expectations. Every evening, she submerged herself deeper into the life of the Roman emperor, dissecting his decisions, questioning his motives, and reframing their implications onto her own life. Caligula was notorious for his ambition but also for the chaos it generated. The parallels were undeniable, and she found comfort in the idea that ambition could take on many forms, even destructive ones. In moments of self-doubt, she scribbled this realization in her journal: ambition must be wielded with intention to truly shape one's identity rather than destroy it. One afternoon, Tara discovered a lecture series on leadership styles that juxtaposed historical figures like Caligula with modern-day leaders. It sparked a flame within her. She envisioned conducting her seminar, focusing not merely on historical analysis but coaching attendees on how to carve their paths while avoiding the pitfalls evident in Caligula's legacy. In her mind, she could hear Janet's words echoing back, laced with challenge, reminding her of the scrutiny that all leaders draw. This was her opportunity to embrace transparency rather than cower beneath expectations. Tara set to work drafting a proposal. Each paragraph flowed from her pen, fueled by a mix of clarity and purpose. She alluded to her journey not just as an academic venture but as a foundation for self-discovery. Each sentence melded her experiences with her research, aiming to bond with the audience through honesty and resolve. Questions bubbled up in her mind: what if she could inspire others struggling with their own legacies? Creating this connection ignited an exhilarating sense of agency within her. Tara understood that sharing her story could redefine the narrative surrounding ambition and expectation. She needed to connect that experience with Caligula's imprudent choices. They weren't just mistakes, they were cautionary tales. There was power in her journey, a moment of catharsis yet to solidify. As she set the ink-drenched proposal aside, fatigue overtook her. She sank into her chair, vacant eyes reflecting the day's toil. With every step she took towards redefining herself, the looming confrontation with her father felt more necessary. The question darting through her mind was not merely about understanding Caligula, but also about the legitimacy of her voice. Was she ready to stand before her father, not as his daughter but as a woman wielding her narrative? Tara's breath hitched at the thought. Would he recognize her evolution, or would he see only the shadow of his expectations? Nights of contemplation delivered no easy answers, but the fire within her was relentless. She was crafting not only a response to her father but also a manifesto of her own identity. In that moment, Tara resolved to take massive action. She would reach out to her father to arrange their conversation. The urgency to confront the past clashed with the fear of potential rejection. The internal dialogue intensified. She was ready to battle not just for her legitimacy, but also for the autonomy she craved. The email lay open on her screen, cursor blinking incessantly, a rhythmic pulse of uncertainty. With a final deep breath, Tara steadied herself. What would she say? How would he respond? It was time to challenge the legacy he created, but more importantly, to carve out her space within it. With fingers hovering over the keys, she hesitated for the briefest of moments, the electric tension of vulnerability filling the room. Would she uncover truths she wasn't yet prepared to face? Today, she would take the first step, but ultimately, what awaited her on the other side remained uncertain yet crucial, both a reckoning and an awakening. Tara stared at the blinking cursor, each pulse echoing her racing heartbeat. She was teetering on the edge of a pivotal moment, yet something held her captive, a thread of uncertainty that wove through her thoughts. How could she articulate her burgeoning identity? The question lingered, heavy and pregnant with implications. In waves of determination, she reflected on her journey thus far. The late nights absorbed in Caligula's tumultuous reign had unraveled not only the emperor's failings but her own guarded ambitions. Each blunder laid bare the essence of leadership, how one misstep could lead to chaos. But, perhaps it was this chaos that she needed to confront, not just in the annals of history, but in her own familial legacy. Gripping her pen, Tara made a list, 10 transformative practices of Caligula, carefully drawing parallels with her own life. The first was ambition, unchecked and blinding, a trait he embraced with unapologetic fervor. She recalled the times she felt the same drive within her, only to second-guess herself when shaped by her father's expectations. Was it ambition if it conformed to others' visions? The second was manipulation, a tool Caligula wielded expertly. Tara recognized the influence of others in her own life, like her father and Janet, who had shaped how she perceived success and leadership. If Caligula held people in thrall, what kind of leader was she allowing herself to become? One who asserts authenticity or one who bends to external pressures? As she continued listing his practices, indifference, fortitude, disdain for tradition, her perspective shifted. Each revelation about Caligula tethered her desires to the ground, grounding her insights in an uncomfortable reality. Learning about his failures made her consider her relationship with power. Could she use ambition to forge connections rather than divide? Hours passed, and the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange hue through her window. A sense of clarity began to wash over her. Tara had spent years fostering a desire to please, but in doing so, she lost sight of her own narrative. This realization ignited a flicker of rebellion in her spirit. It was time to reclaim her story. With newfound conviction, she formulated her email to her father. The words sprang forth, unapologetic and unwavering. She expressed not just her intent to discuss the past but her desire to redefine their relationship. Tara's voice shone vividly through her prose, infusing each sentence with the resilience she had cultivated. But suddenly, uncertainty knocked ominously at the door of her confidence. What if he rejected this new Tara? Was she prepared for that outcome? The thought sent a jolt of doubt through her, a visceral reminder that while she had set her intentions, her father's reaction remained an unknown variable. Tara fought the tightening sensation in her chest. She would have to confront this like Caligula had faced rebellion within his reign. Her motives weren't destructive, they were necessary. Each practice she had delineated in her notes served as a reminder of her potential to lead courageously without succumbing to destructive tendencies. Sitting back in her chair, she took a deep breath. She must not forget that her journey, though unique, could serve as inspiration. This was about expressing who she was meant to be by engaging with her father, by confronting her fears, and by allowing herself to be vulnerable. She pressed send. With that simple act, Tara felt the weight of the world shift. It was done, the message was out there, unleashed and vulnerable, akin to bare branches against a harsh winter sky. As she immersed herself in the ensuing silence, the tension surged within her. What awaited her now? Tara understood that an inevitable crossroad approached. Would her father meet her with acceptance or resistance? The next chapter of her journey was about to unfold, and it teetered on the cusp of revelation. In a moment of quiet desperation, an inner voice urged her to prepare for the confrontation. Would she emerge stronger than ever? Or be left grappling with unfulfilled expectations? Each potential outcome loomed before her, pulsating with imminent possibilities. The next phase beckoned, and Tara was ready to face whatever truth lay hidden in the shadows. Tara's heart raced as she visualized the potential conversation with her father. The silence in her small apartment felt almost suffocating, amplifying her racing thoughts. She wrestled with her fear of rejection, pulling at the threads of her newfound convictions. Was she ready to face the man who had shaped her doubts, who represented the very authority she was challenging? The question loomed larger than ever. Her laptop sat open, the draft of her email glowing on the screen as a reminder of the risk she had taken. With a comforting warmth from her coffee cup, she returned to her list of Caligula's practices. She felt oddly tethered to his story, both revolted and fascinated by his chaotic ambition. Yet here she was, grasping for her own identity while he had grasped for power with devastating results. Using Caligula as her backdrop, the third transformative practice crossed her mind: unpredictability. Tara had often played it safe, following the patterns expected of her, but Caligula thrived on his unpredictability, often turning allies into adversaries without a second thought. Would her own unpredictability serve if wielded with intention? Adopting the courage to be spontaneous could redefine how she interacted with the world, replacing fear with calculated risk. At that moment, she abruptly stood up and moved toward the small bookshelf in her living room, examining the treasures collected over the years, the familiar tomes of historical significance, each representing a puzzle piece of her identity. As she thumbed through, she stopped at a worn copy of Leadership and Self-Deception. It was a sentiment that echoed deep within her. Perhaps her father would see her not as a reflection of himself but rather as an individual emerging into her own light. The clock ticked ominously, echoing her escalating anxiety. Tara felt exposed, eyeing the space around her, which had shifted from a sanctuary to a battleground. In this battle, she battled her old self and the habits that bound her. Her fingers tingled at the prospect of newfound power, even if it meant facing her father's scrutiny. She thought back to her instincts about manipulation and how she could draw a line between using influence authentically and bending to others' narratives. Could she confront her father without losing herself while navigating the waters of their complex relationship? This would be a delicate dance, but a necessary one. Returning to her chair, the laptop still shimmering with the frailty of her previously composed words, Tara took a deep breath. What if she embraced the practice of fortitude, as Caligula had, yet replaced the self-serving chaos with purpose? She needed to express vulnerability but also strength, asserting her individuality while fostering a dialogue that might cultivate understanding rather than conflict. With renewed energy, Tara crafted a follow-up plan in her mind. Before initiating the conversation, she would jot down the key points she wanted to convey: her aspirations, her re-evaluation of their relationship, and her desire for respect and understanding. Just as she began writing, a ping resonated in the room, a notification on her phone. It was a reply from her father, concise and to the point. "Let's talk." The simple command sent adrenaline coursing through her veins. This moment, the one she had been anticipating with both trepidation and excitement, was finally upon her. Would she dive into this head first, armed with her newfound insight and clarity, or remain cautious like she always had? As she contemplated her next steps, a thrill gripped her. The time had come to face her father, to confront the man whose expectations had often clouded her vision. Here lay the opportunity to unfurl her wings and redefine their relationship, yet shadows of doubt whispered in the corner of her mind. She was right at the edge of transformation, and she had to decide whether to leap into this new interaction with courage or hesitance. Would she harness her newfound voice to bridge the chasm between them? The path ahead was murky but electrifying, each footfall rippling with potential for a new understanding. The confrontation was set, now she needed to summon the strength she had painstakingly cultivated. Would this dialogue bring forth a metamorphosis or only deepen the divide? The echoes of her own fears swayed in the balance, leaving her with one final question: how would she choose to step into this next chapter of her life? Tara leaned back in her chair, staring at the phone as if it held all the answers she sought. The brief exchange with her father loomed over her, colored with anticipation and fear. The weight of the moment pressed down on her. It was not merely a conversation, it was a reckoning, a confrontation that could alter the course of her life. She scrabbled for a pen, brainstorming the key points she wanted to discuss. The aspiration for autonomy, the need for respect, her burgeoning identity, they all coalesced into a singular focus that burst forth onto the page. Tara felt an electrifying sense of purpose replace her previous hesitations. It was time she confronted the very foundation of her self-doubt, and in doing so, perhaps she would find clarity in her aspirations. In her preparations, she recalled the unpredictable nature of Caligula's reign, which was marked more by emotional turbulence than any logical method. Tara had no desire to replicate the chaos, yet a flicker of inspiration ignited within her. What if she reframed unpredictability as a tool for growth? She could surprise her father with the depth of her thoughts and the authority of her voice. Choosing an appropriate venue became paramount. A public place could dilute their personal tension and provide an implicit reminder that she was not merely an extension of his will. Tara decided on a nearby cafe, its casual ambience potentially softening the blow of confrontation. She dressed deliberately, selecting clothes that reflected who she was and who she aimed to be, a balance of professionalism and authenticity. Staring into the mirror, she practiced her opening lines until the sound of her own voice felt steady, as if someone else were echoing her sentiment back. This small act, gazing upward, gave her a glimpse of the empowered woman she was becoming. She was no longer just a girl trying to escape her father's shadow, but a woman stepping into her own light. As she stepped into the cafe, the inviting aroma of coffee and pastries enveloped her, but it did little to mask her excitement-fueled anxiety. The usual hustle of everyday patrons served as a curious backdrop to her inner battle. She arrived early, claiming a table by the window, and absorbed the rhythm of life outside, a reminder that existence continued unabated. Minutes felt like hours, and her resolve fluctuated as she awaited her father. She glanced at her notes, pausing to contemplate what she would say when he arrived. This was not only about addressing her own needs but also about fostering an understanding that could bridge their disparate worlds. Just then, she spotted him through the glass. A silhouette familiar yet ever so distant. As he entered, Tara's heart thudded in her chest. He walked with the same confidence she had always associated with authority, a reminder that he remained steadfast in his beliefs. Tara's breath hitched, flooding her gaze with uncharted emotions. As he approached, she forced herself to stand, her legs trembling slightly but her stance firm. "Thank you for coming," she managed, her voice steady despite the storm inside. Her father regarded her with an inscrutable expression, one that hinted at ingrained paternal expectations but also curiosity. "We need to talk," he said, settling into his chair, the words heavy with unexpressed thoughts. It was here, in this moment, under the scrutiny of his gaze, that Tara questioned the limits of her resolve. Would she summon the courage to peel back their history of misunderstandings? Each phrase she had rehearsed echoed loudly in her mind, mixing with uncertainty about whether he could embrace her transformation. As the conversation unfolded layer by layer, like the pages of a long-closed book, she felt herself grappling with deeply ingrained expectations and the risk of disillusionment. Would her voice truly resonate, transforming not just their relationship but also her perception of herself? With every inch they traversed together, a revelation stirred within her. This was more than a conversation, it was an exploration of truth that might validate her journey toward individuality. The stakes were higher than she anticipated, but with that heightened tension came an exhilarating clarity. The moment became palpable, charged with the tension of the unknown. Could this be a turning point for both of them, or would it lead to another wall being erected between them? As their dialogue commenced, Tara realized that despite her rigorous preparation, the real test lay in her ability to adapt, to embrace the unpredictability of the outcomes. She had to engage dynamically, allowing the momentum of their exchange to shape the course of the encounter, deciding to make it a conversation rather than a confrontation. With each word spoken, a new layer of her potential unveiled itself, layered with hope and trepidation. She could feel the edge of growth beckoning not just in this meeting but in all aspects of her life. What would emerge from this encounter would mold not only her future but the very nature of their connection. Yet an undercurrent of conflict still surged beneath the surface. Would this meeting reaffirm their bond, or highlight the chasm that had grown over the years? Each breath, each pause, held the potential for either transformation or collapse. With this swirling uncertainty lingering, Tara braced herself for what lay ahead, knowing she had come too far to turn back now. How could she convert this confrontation into a communion of understanding? Would she find the skill within to reshape her narrative, or would she remain entrapped in the past? The moment was fragile, and Tara felt the weight of destiny resting heavily on her shoulders. Tara sat opposite her father, the steaming cup of coffee forgotten in her hands. The initial silence felt heavy, like thick fog hanging in the air, each moment pregnant with possibility. She could feel the tension between them, a chasm forged through years of unspoken words and misaligned expectations. Today would either be a breakthrough or an impasse, and she was determined to bridge that divide. She took a deep breath, her resolve crystallizing as she recalled everything she had prepared. This was not merely a conversation, it was a heritage of inherited burdens laid bare, a chance for liberation. Channeling her inspiration from Caligula's troubling legacy, she decided to step into the unknown with courage. "Dad," she began, her voice steady yet almost melodic, "I appreciate you coming here. I need to express some things I've grappled with for a long time." His brow furrowed slightly, and the weight of his gaze urged her on. "Go on," he replied, not dismissively, but with a guarded interest that encouraged her to unfold her thoughts. "I've spent so long trying to fit into what I believed you wanted from me," she continued, her heart pounding at the raw honesty spilling forth. "I realize now that in that pursuit, I lost sight of who I am. This conference, my research, even the manuscript, these are parts of my identity that I need to embrace." He leaned back, a gesture that unsettled her momentarily. She pressed on, fueled by her desire for clarity. "I used to think ambition was a burden, something that trapped me in your expectations. But through my studies, I discovered that ambition can be my strength if wielded wisely. I'm discovering who I am outside the fear of disappointing you." Her father's eyes held a mix of surprise and skepticism. "You think ambition defines you, Tara?" he asked, a hint of disbelief threading through his tone. "It does, but I want to reshape it. History teaches us that ambition without reflection leads to chaos," she countered, making the connection between her research and her personal narrative. "I've always admired your achievements, but I don't want to be your legacy, I want to build my own." A contemplative silence hung between them. Tara could feel the pulse of her heartbeat, an echoing reminder of everything at stake. In this quiet, she braved a glance at her father, seeking any inklings of understanding. "Your successes have meant everything to me, but the pressure that weight made it challenging to pursue my own path," she admitted. "I'm learning to untangle those threads, but I need you to understand this isn't a rejection of you. It's an acceptance of myself." The intensity of the moment hung thick in the air, their reflections dark but revealing. Her father shifted slightly, his expression softening at her heartfelt confession. Tara's heart raced at the potential opening, a space where old grudges could dissipate and clarity emerge. "Perhaps I've overshadowed your ambitions with my own expectations," he finally said, his voice steady and reflective. "I always thought I was preparing you for success, when maybe I should have been allowing you to define it for yourself." Encouraged by his admission, Tara felt a rush of gratitude and a glimmer of hope for transformation. "Yes," she encouraged, her voice nearly breaking with emotion. "And I want to share my journey with you now. Can we redefine our relationship on this new groundwork?" A hesitant nod from him told her he was considering her words, grappling with the unfamiliar idea of shared territory rather than a hierarchical relationship. No longer stuck under any looming expectations, Tara felt the winds of change gently pushing her forward. She launched into her vision for her academic future, how she sought to guide others by using her story and her insights about leadership, ambition, and the dangers of falling into destructive patterns. She envisioned seminars that would echo her learning, urging individuals to reshape their narratives rather than be pawns to their pasts. Their conversation deepened, ebbing and flowing like a shared dance. Questions emerged, followed by revelations. Tara's father began to unveil his own vulnerabilities, detailing the weight of his own childhood aspirations, stitched together with doubt and the haunting specter of his own failures. What had once been a monologue now evolved into a dialogue, two figures threading together understanding and acceptance. I realize now that I should have encouraged you to pursue your passion rather than merely respond to my definition of success, he said softly, his voice carrying a tremor of authenticity. Tara felt a cascade of soothing energy flowing between them, cemented in this newfound clarity. Each word passed between them felt like the fragments of a broken mirror being pieced back together. They started to see the reflections of their true selves. As their conversation drew to a close, the weight within her lifted, a space carved out for the emergence of both her identity and their renewed relationship. They embraced, a tentative but vital gesture, igniting a binding thread of connection they had both longed for. While Tara was aware that this was just the beginning, she felt empowered not just from this conversation but by the realization that she had conquered her trepidation, transformed her fears into a bridge towards understanding. She left the cafe animated by visions of what lay ahead, fueled by the knowledge that the real legacy was not her father's or Caligula's, but her own, the legacy of authenticity she would craft for herself. And that was her victory, not merely stepping into the light but finding assurance that the shadows intertwined were worthy of exploration. She had turned confrontation into communion, emerging not just victorious but awakened a professional poised on the brink of a luminous new chapter. As she walked down the street, the sun breaking through the clouds, Tara made a vow to herself: she would write not just about Caligula's failures but her own story of resilience. It was time to inspire others to own their narratives and redefine their paths. The echoes of what she had discovered burned brightly ahead, and she was ready to take on the mantle not just as an academic but as a beacon of authenticity. In this way, she had come full circle, embracing the transformative power of her journey and finally asserting her voice. Now, it is your turn to embark on your journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, your support makes a difference. Comment with your reactions and theories about Tara's transformation and how you can relate to her story. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this empowering conclusion. Remember, every step towards your growth matters, and you need to be part of this community. Don't wait even one more second to share. You have the power to inspire transformation.